Okay, good morning. Good morning. We're going to be on with Jacqueline Haigh today. This is going to be Ancient Mysteries Part One, and Jacqueline and I met in UK London here last few weeks, and she's just an expert in going over the secrets revealed and ancient mysteries. And we're going to do a she's going to do a series, a multi-part series with me, covering some like secrets revealed that have really never been taught before in the mainstream. So, Jacqueline Haigh, it's great to meet you and on the call here today. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Gavin. Thanks so much for having me. Great to see
Yeah,
you.
it's great to see you as well. What why don't you start and start with your story and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I come from quite a working class background. My dad was a Cockney, my mum's from Glasgow, but I loved acting. I had my first drama lesson when I was 11, and I felt like, oh, this is what I'm born to do. I grew up in Essex, which is let's say, a very kind of materialistic place, not all that cultured. So I was considered kind of weird and arty and didn't fit in, like I was posh or something. And then I got a place to read English at Oxford University, and I was the first one from my school ever to do that. So when I was 18, I got to Oxford, and now I'm surrounded kind of by rich people's kids, and they've all gone to the top schools like Eton. So now I don't fit in because I'm too common. But I still loved acting, and I did a show in the first term, and it did pretty well. And so then I started to meet more actors there, and it was people like Hugh Dancy, who's now married to Claire Danes, and Amelia Fox, who comes from this famous acting dynasty, but I still didn't really fit in. And then when I was at Oxford, there was a guy called David Beard, who was a Hollywood writer and director. And he was over in London doing a show in the West End, starring the British comedian Eddie Izzard, who's been on Broadway recently. And David really encouraged me to do my first one-woman show. And it was this kind of edgy, feminist, punk kind of show called Mad Woman in the Attic. And it did very well in the national press and got really good reviews. Um, After I left Oxford, David encouraged me to go to New York. And he said, "Oh, the city is made for you, honey." And I got there, and it really was incredible. It was like the shackles of the British class system came off, and I felt really liberated. And I trained at Ensemble Studio Theatre that a lot of actors like Sarah Jessica Parker had come through. And people heard about my show, and I put it on in a little theatre off Broadway, and it was doing really well. And a casting director asked me to come in for a movie, and it looked like I might get a big break. And then my visa ran out, and I had no money. I mean, I was living basically doing flyering for a restaurant and making the food last for loads of days. So I came back to England, and really it all looked hopeless. It looked like I was never going to achieve my dream of acting. I was living in this little room in a house which has now been condemned. But then one day I was felt really strongly to go into this bookshop, which is in North London. And it was the Offstage Theatre Bookshop. It's like this very old little bookshop with loads of the old scripts and theatre programmes and things. And I was standing there when suddenly from the basement of the theatre, this little guy walks up, and he's kind of like a troll, and he's got sort of big bushy eyebrows and big bushy hair. And he says to me, "Oh, are you Jacqueline Haigh?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I am." And he recognized me from the reviews of my show. "Oh, well then, you better come downstairs." So I follow him downstairs because below this bookshop is a theatre in the basement. And this guy is actually Ken Campbell, who is a famous or even infamous actor, writer, director in Britain. He passed a few years ago, but he was really famous for directing very weird and wonderful plays. So in the 70s, he had directed a production of The Illuminatus, based on the books by Robert Anton Wilson, all about conspiracy theories. He loved anything weird and wonderful. And at that time, he was directing a show called The Warp. And it was written by Neil Oram, about Neil Oram's life. But it was really like a history of the hippie and counterculture movement from the late 50s to the late 70s. So that day I got given the main female part, and I went home with a stack of scripts like this because it was a 10 play cycle. It lasted 24 hours. And doing the warp, performing in this was really my first real initiation into magic and mystery, because this play covered every kind of countercultural subject you can think of. So it started in the 50s with beat poetry and Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac. It went into the 60s with, LSD, Timothy Leary, interest in mystics like Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. It followed the hippie trail in the late 60s to India with gurus like Rajneesh, who became Osho, and the ashrams out there. Then it came back to Britain, and in the early 70s, it showed the beginning of festival culture, which is what had happened here with Glastonbury Festival and the other festivals. Glastonbury Festival started in 1970. So, I got so deeply immersed in this world because of being in this play that it was this very, very deep initiation. And then after that, I got a part in a show in Bali. And that was my first time in an Eastern culture. And this is before Instagram, before the internet was really very prominent. So it was like going to another planet. So, I was there dancing in the moonlight with the traditional gamelan orchestra playing, ding, 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 ding. And all the guys, they would put on masks of like Hanuman, the monkey god, and go into trance. And it was really magical, very mysterious. And Bali's predominantly a Hindu culture, which believe in reincarnation. So I became very interested in reincarnation. When I came back to England, I made a documentary for Channel 4, which was a light-hearted look at reincarnation, which I called Do You Come Here Often? And in it, I tried to find out what I had been in a past life, and I had hypnotic regression to try and find out more. So I had these kind of two sides of my life. On the one hand, I was in show business, and I was acting in theatre and TV and stuff. But I was getting more and more into the mysteries. And then when I was 33, I went to India. And this is what really changed my life, because I went for 3 weeks and I ended up staying for 6 months. And I just went on an impromptu pilgrimage. I would go wherever I felt that I was being called to go. People would run up to me with a little bit of paper with a kind of name written on it that I couldn't read, saying, "Madam, you must go here." And I went there. I had no money. I was traveling around on the government buses. But I felt really guided, especially by Ganesha, the elephant god, Hindu elephant god, who is a cosmic force who removes obstacles. So one day I was starting in Gokarna, which is a very sacred town of Ganesh, outside a temple, and foreigners weren't even really supposed to go into that temple. But the priest came out into the street, grabbed me away from my friend, pushed me into the temple, this tiny little temple with all these kind of pilgrims in their black loincloths chanting. It was very intense. And I went to the special Ganesh statue there, and I prayed to be able to stay in India. And then the next day, my acting agent from London contacts me and says, "Oh, darling, an advert you were in has just sold to Lithuania. How can I send you the money?" So I was able to stay in India and go to all these incredible places. And I had many mystic experiences there in meditation, for example, traveling out of my body to other planets, and all kinds of direct experiences. Because for me, that's really important, that it's not just book learning spirituality, but you start to have direct experience as well. I continued my studies. I trained in mantra with a guy called Thomas Ashley Farrand, who was also known as Namadeva, who with his wife Satyabhama, he was one of the Western world's foremost experts on Sanskrit mantras. So I started to really learn how, by making certain sounds and vibrations, we change energy and therefore matter. I also studied Tantra with Marananda Sarita, and she had been with Rajneesh, who then became Osho, for a very long time, living in his ashram. And she taught us how although there's this big focus on sex in the kind of neo-tantra movement, that is only one small part of a much bigger field of expanding consciousness. So I studied with her. When I came back to England, I did a master's in script writing, and the very first job I got hired to do was a movie called The Glastonbury Grail. So I was writing a screenplay based on a book all about the myths and the legends around Glastonbury. And the original book was written by David Hatfield, and it's like a collation of all these myths and legends, and I was turning it into a story, into a movie. And this is really my deep initiation into the Glastonbury mysteries, the Avalon mysteries. I kept on studying. I had a deep immersion into the Mayan pyramids in Mexico. I went to a lot of crop circles. I started to play a lot of goddesses in theatre shows, sort of embodying them. For example, Melusine, the twin-tailed mermaid goddess, who the Knights Templar worshipped, which is on the logo of Starbucks. I even did a stand-up comedy show called Goddess, and that was doing really well. And I'd just done these big shows in London, and then lockdown happened. And that was another big turning point for me, like for a lot of people. It made me go within, literally, and metaphorically, because, you know, the theatres were closed. So then I moved to Glastonbury, and I started training with a shamanic practitioner called Keith Robinson. He's English, but his teacher's teacher was the Cuban-born author of a lot of books on shamanism called Alberto Villoldo. And his masters in turn were the Peruvian masters. So I started working professionally as a shamanic healer. And then at the beginning of 2023, I went to Egypt for the first time. And that was really the beginning of my immersion into the ancient Egyptian mysteries, which maybe I'll come back and talk to you about another time. But it's interesting because there's actually quite a lot of connections between Glastonbury and Egypt.
Sounds like sounds like in the future like in another episode we could really go and start getting into the secrets of Egypt. So that's going to be something to come. So I mean, this is incredibly really on a flow here. So I really appreciate you wanted to let you go on that. It was really good. And so it sounds like you sent a bunch of slides that you wanted me to that we can go through in our last we had a call, and really you've got some detailed pictures I want to share. So
Lovely.
Would you like to start with some of those?
Definitely. So first of all, I'm just going to introduce you to Glastonbury. It's a small town in the southwest of England. The official population is only about 9,000. If you know Glastonbury in Connecticut, one sec, I'll come on to that one in a minute. So okay. Do you know Glastonbury in Connecticut?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know it, no.
So that's named after here because some of the settlers in the 1600s went from here to there and founded it there. So although Glastonbury's small, it's this very powerful town, and pilgrims from all around the world come here for healing and spiritual awakening from all different religious traditions. We actually have more than 70 practicing spiritual faiths in Glastonbury at the moment. And many of the people come here feel that they've been called here. It's this deep calling. And the special energy of Glastonbury has even attracted Hollywood celebrities like Johnny Depp and Nicolas Cage, who have both bought houses here and lived here. So the first picture there is what most people that haven't been to Glastonbury, they know about Glastonbury from Glastonbury Festival. So that is one of the biggest performance arts festivals in the world. So that's that first slide there. So that is the main stage at Glastonbury Festival, which is called the Pyramid Stage, and it's built to resemble the Great Pyramids at Giza. But what most people don't realise is the festival is actually about 7 miles from the town of Glastonbury. So that's our next slide. You can see the town. That's it. So you can see there, it's a really magical place. On the left of the picture, you can see all the old buildings like the Georgian Pilgrim, which was built in 1475 and is said to be one of the most haunted pubs in Britain. On the other side of the road, you can see the crystal shops. And that's the thing about Glastonbury town. it's basically full of crystal shops, magic wands, incense. It's like a real life Diagon Alley from Harry Potter. You know, you can't buy anything normal like a pair of socks. If you want anything normal, you have to go to the next town. You can only get magic wands and things like that. So there's magic in the air here, and there's a lot of synchronicity. It tends to be one of those places where if you think about someone, you'll bump into them. And also a lot of mad stuff happens there, you know, but everyone's used to it. So, for example, if you see someone walking down the high street naked, which you quite often do there, everyone just kind of rolls their eyes and says, oh, well, it's normal for Glastonbury. So it's interesting that Glastonbury is certainly the only town in the UK that I know of that celebrates the Wheel of the Year. So that's our next slide. And you can see this is a depiction of the so-called Wheel of the Year, which is an annual cycle of 8 seasonal festivals that were celebrated in the ancient world. And they mark the major solar events through the year, like the solstices, summer solstice, winter solstice, the equinox, spring equinox, autumn equinox, and then the midpoints between them. And this cycle represents the continual cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth observed in nature. These pagan festivals have been revived in Glastonbury, and a lot of the town come out to celebrate them. So why has Glastonbury got such special energy? Well, one of the reasons is this. There it is, Glastonbury Tor. So this is a huge hill, about 158 meters high, on the edge of the town, and you can see it from miles away. So for those ceremonies for the Wheel of the Year, hundreds of people will go to the top of that Tor, despite the weather often being pretty bad. They'll go up to the top of the Tor to celebrate the sunrise on, for example, summer solstice or winter solstice. You can
This is the
see
Labyrinth, right? Where they have a labyrinth under there?
Well, that's very interesting because the mainstream explanation is that this is a natural hill. It's made of limestone and clay, but that it's naturally formed and that those terraces are natural terraces. The thing is, they don't really explain how they were formed. So one theory comes from Ronald Hutton, who's a pagan historian, really, and he says that that is actually a spiral walkway that goes up the Tor that was built in medieval times for the pilgrims to go up to the church that used to be on top of the hill. The tower's the only part left of that now. And you can still walk around the Tor up that way like a labyrinth. It's not easy because it's a bit overgrown in places and it takes about 8 hours, whereas it's half an hour if you just kind of go up the normal way. But there is also a legend that comes from the time of the Druids. The Druids were the spiritual leaders of Britain in the tribal society in Celtic times before the Romans came and brought Christianity. So in Druid legend, it's said that there is a labyrinth inside the Tor. And when you entered it, you had to enter the labyrinth, walk through the labyrinth, and if you managed to come out of it, then you became a Druid. If you didn't, well, that's the way it goes. Initiations never easy, are they? So that's the mythology about the Tor. Another reason...
So it's in a special place, though, right? It has ley lines and it has all these...
Exactly.
Right?
So that may be one of the reasons that the Tor is so powerful, because so many ley lines cross there. So ley lines are these energy lines, a bit like meridians in the human body. Ley lines are the energy lines in the earth. And you can see this is a beautiful ley line map that was put together by a very well-loved Glastonbury mystic, Paulden Jenkins, and you can see quite how many lines cross in Glastonbury. One of those lines, the main line that goes through the south of England, so it continues beyond Glastonbury into Cornwall and onwards to France, is called the Michael Line. And they call it that because it has a lot of churches dedicated to Saint Michael built along it. And they say that's like a straight masculine energy. But on the Tor, there's supposed to be weaving in and out of the Michael Line and it goes down again through the country, the Mary line. And the Mary line has a lot of churches dedicated to St. Mary on it. And that kind of is supposed to be a more feminine line that weaves in and out. So maybe it is this coming together of these energy lines that is giving the Tor its power. So
Where's
meridians,
London compared to this?
London, you have to go kind of east and north, so the other way. If
Oh,
you went
east,
the other
sorry.
way, yeah, you'd be going up
Over
to
here.
London that way, up
So
this
this
way.
is on the is it on this on the UK island? This Glastonbury? Is it on UK?
Yeah, yeah, it's in the United Kingdom. It's in the
Okay.
southwest. From
Got it.
London, you go southwest. Takes about 3 hours to drive.
Cool.
And so it's the west of England, or it's also known as the West Country. So basically, in the same way that one sec, just go back to the ley lines for a moment. Yeah. So in the same way that the meridian lines go through the body into chakras, these wheel of energies. So it's said that the same thing happens on the earth. And it's said, well, it was first declared by a philosopher called Robert Kuhn in 1971, that Glastonbury is the heart chakra of the planet. And that idea has now become very popular. I would say that's talked about, yeah, a lot now. But he was the first one to declare that. So that all these energy lines are coming into the heart chakra. And the pyramids of Giza are supposed to be the throat chakra of the planet. So I'm going to stay just on this slide for a minute, or we could go back to the Tor one if you like, because the old name for the Tor is Innis Widrin, which means the Isle of Glass. So it's quite synchronistic because Glastonbury, the town name, actually isn't supposed to have derived from there, but obviously it's quite similar. In physical terms, this is because the Tor, the area in ancient times, the low-lying area around the Tor would flood. And so the Tor was literally an island coming up out of the water. And there were 4 other main sacred hills that came up out of the water. And even today, when there's been a lot of rain, and it rains a lot here, it's 135 days on average a year, you can stand at the top of the Tor and look down, and you will see parts of the low land around it are flooded, and it really looks like it's got a mirror on it or a sheet of glass. And because of this damp weather, we get a lot of mists. And so often you'd be looking at the Tor and there will be a kind of layer of mist. And then the Tor is just rising up out of the mist like a mythical isle. It's very mysterious. But on another level, the Tor is an Isle of Glass because it's a mystical gateway to the other world, or the underworld, or the world of the fairy, which was known as Anwyn in Welsh mythology. And the fairy king of the Tor is a guy called Gwynn. I don't know if you can see behind me, Gavin, if you can close the slide, and I'll show you behind me, but can you see there?
Yeah.
Picture. So that's one of the depictions supposedly of Gwynn, who's the fairy king of the Tor, and he's the guardian of the Tor. And so he's said to live on the Tor. And in the mythology in Druid times, he lived in a palace made of glass. And he was there to receive the spirits of the dead, because Glastonbury was the land of the dead. And the spirits of the dead would come there so that then they could depart and ascend from the top of the Tor. Then in 380 AD, Christianity was made the official religion of Rome and the Roman Empire, and that included Britain. So at first, for a while, you had the Christian tradition and the old Druidic tradition living side by side. And there are some great stories that date from that era. There's one about one of the first Christian saints who's said to have inhabited the Tor in the 7th century, who's called Saint Colin. And the story is that basically he's in his religious retreat and he hears some local people talking about Gwyn ap Nudd, the king of the fairies. And of course, he doesn't like this because he thinks they're devils. And so he tells them to go away, stop talking about devils. But the men get a bit offended and they say, well, Gwyn's not going to like being talked of in that way. We're going to tell him. So they tell him, and Gwynn invites the saint to come and visit him on the top of the Tor in his glass mansion. And at first, the saint's a bit nervous, but in the end he does. And when he gets there, there's the most fabulous palace, glass palace, and it's filled with all the musicians, the minstrels, the courtiers, these gorgeous men and women. And Gwyn welcomes him with a feast and says he can have anything he wants that the other world can give him. But, and this is a legend to this day, Gavin, it's said that if a fairy or one of the fairy folk ever offers you something to eat, you mustn't take it. Because if you do, you will be stuck in the fairy world forever. So you have to remember that if you come to Glastonbury. So Saint Colin, instead, he doesn't want any of this. He throws holy water that he's got over Gwyn underneath. He disappears. The whole of the fairy kingdom disappears, and he goes back to his religious meditation on the Tor. So that was actually the reason why it was a church dedicated to Saint Michael that was built on the Tor, because Saint Michael was the patron saint of attacks against the devil, and obviously in Christian times, that's what they believed Gwyn to be. So that's why there's that tower. Only the tower remains, but that's why.
This is a really, are there a lot of other places on Earth that have this type of ley lines, or is this very, very special?
Well, I would say it tends to be the sacred sites on the Earth. They will tend to be the places where you've got a very intense crossing of ley lines like that. And there are special places with a lot.
I'm looking at this. It reminds me of like some sort of train system or something, like a lot of travel point or ships crossing. So, but it's not for travel. It's for energy.
It's for energy, but there are stories that the shamans in ancient times used to be able to go in a stone circle, which would perhaps be built on one of these crossings of energy lines, and be able to shamanically travel or astral travel along those energy lines.
Now you said you were a shaman, or you studied the shaman. So what can you say what that is exactly?
Yeah. So under a shamanic understanding, we don't really say that time is linear. It's a very multidimensional way of viewing the world. So because of that, for example, doing something like a soul retrieval, it says that when someone experiences trauma, a part of their soul splinters off. But because time isn't linear, you can shamanically travel there, journey there, do some healing or whatever that soul fragment needs, and bring it back to the person in the present day so that they can be more whole. And because in a shamanic understanding, illness and dis-ease is treated in a emotional and spiritual and karmic way, rather than purely looking at it as a physical material problem, a problem with the body. They would treat it on those other levels instead.
Let's go on over to King Arthur.
Yeah, so because now we're getting into Christian times, and the mythology and the archetypes of Glastonbury start to cross over into Christian times. But before I show you King Arthur, Gavin, let me show you something here. If you open the in the screen, because it's very interesting that in Christian times, Glastonbury Tor becomes the legendary Isle of Avalon. Maybe you've heard of that being talked about as Avalon. And this is the mythical island featured in the old stories about King Arthur. But the name Avalon's very interesting because it comes from the Welsh word, it's thought, for apple, meaning apple, meaning apple. And this island is called the Isle of Apples. And there are lots of apples that grow here. Somerset is famous all throughout the UK for cider. But even the humble apple contains its own mystery tradition, because here's a little apple here. There you go. So if you cut an apple across like this, then inside, oops, there you go, you will see it's got the symbol of the pentagram hidden within it. And the pentagram is a pagan symbol of the 5 elements. earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. It's sometimes called the Star of Knowledge. It can be seen in a lot of ancient traditions and is sometimes a symbol of the mystery of life and death. The pentagram is also linked to the Roman goddess Venus, who represents love and beauty, divine femininity. And that's also because of the so-called Venus pentagram, because from our position on Earth, over an 8-year cycle, Venus appears to touch or kiss the Earth 5 times, creating a pentagram. So it's interesting, isn't it, that this fruit, the apple, which gives Avalon its name, actually has the symbol of the divine feminine in it. And as we're going to see, that's so important here. Even the stories of King Arthur, which take place in Avalon, they emphasize the art of chivalry. So chivalry was this medieval code of conduct for knights. It emphasized qualities like bravery, courtesy, honor, and loyalty. A knight dedicated himself to his so-called lady fair, and that was an important part of the chivalric code in romantic fiction. When we talk about chivalry today, we mean honorable behavior towards women. So that connection is very interesting. And the divine feminine runs through here, and I'm going to show you some more examples soon. But yeah, so who was King Arthur? So this was that poster that you just showed. That's right. So that was the last movie that was made about him in 2017 by Guy Ritchie. But there's been so many movies and TV shows. It's such an enduring archetype and story. So the question is, was he real, or is he just a character in stories? So according to legend, the real historical Arthur was a historical king of Britain who lived in the 5th and 6th centuries. But the problem is there's very little reliable evidence that dates from that period. That period, which was a period following the departure of the Romans from Britain, is called the Dark Ages. So some historians doubt whether Arthur really existed, because really King Arthur is a folk hero. And from the 12th century onwards, he became the central figure in one of the great cycles of medieval European literature, the so-called Arthurian romances. And these were so popular in their day. They were really the precursor to the modern novel. The first readers were the aristocracy in the 15th century, which were the only people that could afford books back then, for a start. And they may have had their squires or pages, or maybe themselves, if they could be bothered, read out these stories to pass the winter evening, these long series of stories, a bit like the original Netflix. So in these stories, Arthur is depicted as a warrior king of Britain who led his people in their defense against the Anglo-Saxon conquest of England, and he establishes a vast empire. So he represents national pride and a golden time in the past when there was harmony in the land. And this is his archetype. If you want to come back onto me for a minute, Gavin, I can show you something here, because King Arthur's archetype is one of divine masculinity and positive leadership. He is like the solar king, the solar principle, the sun king. And in that, he is very like this guy from Egypt, Horus, who's also the sun king in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. And interestingly, we get our word, Horus is his Greek name. In the ancient Egyptian language, he was called Heru, and we get our name hero from Heru, Horus. And King Arthur is like the ultimate hero, right? So sometimes King Arthur is depicted sitting on his round table with his knights. You'll see in the next slide.
Knights of the Round Table.
That's it. So the number will change, but in some representations, he is sitting with 12 knights. And symbolically, that can represent Arthur there as the sun and the 12 knights as the 7 astrological signs that the sun appears to pass through over the course of a year. And obviously that also has echoes of Jesus with the 12 apostles. And King Arthur does have a Messiah-like quality. There were certain traditions that maintained that Arthur never died. He is an eternal king, and he will return to the land in a troubled time in order to bring peace and harmony, a bit like a second coming. And these myths about Arthur's messianic return in the past were seen as potentially a threat, because they were seen as a either religious or political threat by some of the authorities. So if King Arthur is like this sun, and his knights are like the zodiac signs, perhaps the myths about him, like so many myths in the ancient world, are actually encoding star lore. In ancient Egypt, we'll see this with so many of the gods and goddesses. Those archetypes in the ancient Egyptian pantheon are strongly associated with certain stars. So, for example, goddess Isis is Sirius. If you look at the origin of the word Arthur, some say that that Welsh name actually means bear. So one theory is that Arthur comes from Arcturus, which is a very bright star close to the constellation Ursa Major, aka the Big Bear, the Great Bear. So that's the next slide there. The next slide will show you here the Big Dipper, which is we can all see in the sky and all recognize, hopefully, is a very recognizable pattern of stars within the Great Bear constellation. And the Big Dipper travels around Polaris, or the North Star. It's always above the horizon and it never rises or sets, so it can be seen at any time of the year from northern latitudes. And because of this, it was used in the Northern Hemisphere to find the North Star, or Polaris, which was used for navigation because it appears to stay in a fixed position directly above the North Pole. So, literally speaking, that was used for navigation of ships by the stars. But metaphorically speaking, it's like Arthur is connected to this idea of maintaining your true north, maintaining your true moral compass, which is the ancient art of chivalry.
So are there any books that King Arthur wrote, or are there any scriptures, or is it more mythology? We're not sure if he actually existed because of this Dark Ages.
That's it. So there are all these stories that are written about him come from the 12th century onwards. And then in the 15th century, that's where they start to become very popular. 15th century onwards, all the way up till, today.
So stories like as in fiction?
Yeah, well, mythology.
Mythology.
So legends.
Yeah.
So this is the interesting thing with mythology and legends, is like some people say, yes, they're just fiction, but ancient cultures always use mythologies as a way of passing on knowledge and passing on information. And that was also part of the initiatic tradition, that because you were initiated, you understood how the mythology was working on a deeper level. And this is something we see again and again in the mysteries. Something will be, have multiple layers of meaning. It will be true or on one layer, on a literal meaning, on a physical meaning, but then there will be layers of metaphysical or symbolic meanings as well, that only you understand if you've been initiated. So then you have eyes to see, and that's the purpose of initiation, to be able to have eyes to see this magic around you operating on other levels. So yeah, the next slide there, Gavin, that's Cadbury Castle. So that's a real location. It's about 18 miles from Glastonbury. It's a Bronze and Iron Age hill fort, and that's said to be the real location of King Arthur's Camelot, his court, his castle, where that round table was. So
Camelot.
Camelot, it's called, yeah. So as you can see, there's no ruins on it, but it also has terraces. And the people that say this was Camelot say that that could be the remnants of the old defences of the castle. When you go up there, it's got an incredible energy, very, very peaceful energy. So it definitely feels like there's a kind of magic in the air when you go up there. Now, King Arthur in the legends is said to be buried in Glastonbury Abbey. So that's the next picture.
Oh,
So this is the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. It's in the centre of the town. Basically, around 1190, the monks claim to have discovered the bones of Arthur and his wife, Queen Guinevere, with a cross saying, "Here lies entombed the renowned King Arthur in the island of Avalon." So they made a big ceremony of this and built a tomb for him and buried him. However, some people say this isn't true. Most historians agree it was actually like a PR stunt, because King Edward I needed to raise money to renovate the abbey after a fire. And after this moment, the abbey became a very big focus for pilgrimage. Pilgrimage was big business in that era. If you had the bones of someone important or an important saint, something like that, these were the celebrities of their day. And they brought a lot of pilgrims, and as the Sex Pistols said, tourists are money. So whether Arthur really is buried there or not is very dubious. But Glastonbury Abbey was so powerful in its day. It was the second wealthiest monastery in Britain, and the abbots who ran it lived in splendour. And due to its wealth and spiritual importance, it was sometimes termed as a second Rome. And they had a very interesting tradition there, which was called the perpetual choir. So you can see another picture of another angle of the abbey. That's right. Very beautiful. So they had a perpetual choir there. And this was an ancient tradition where there were a group of monks, some say 12, chanting round the clock chants continuously. And some people say that this is actually an older Druidic tradition, which the Druids would have done. And the idea is that through making these mantras, and it shows that in this land, in the ancient world, we understood the power of mantras too, that they are literally enchanting the landscape, keeping the sacred vibration alive. And if we do believe that it's full of those energy lines, then making those vibrations is sending that energy, those good vibrations and that energy across the energy lines, through the energy lines across the country and into the different chakras on the earth. But all this wealth and power attracted the jealous eyes of that man. Yep. He's the one. He's King Henry VIII. Because in 1539, he wanted to become the head of the church. So he broke away from the Catholic Church of Rome and he closed down all the monasteries. Glastonbury Abbey was one of the last monasteries to be dissolved. They took all the valuables away, they dismantled the structures and just used the stones for other buildings around. And they also killed the last abbot of Glastonbury, and this is a guy called Richard Whiting.
He was one of the last?
He was the very last. So, to send a very clear message, he was tied to what was called a hurdle, which was like a wooden panel, and dragged along the ground by horse through the streets of Glastonbury, in front of his now empty abbey, and then taken all the way up to the top of the Tor. And there he was hung. Then he was taken down. They call it hung, drawn, and quartered. So he was taken down, disemboweled, beheaded, and cut into quarters.
This sounds like the history of tyrants, what we call tyrants.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because
he was a tyrant, this guy.
He was the
ultimate tyrant, it sounds like.
Kind of embodying the Dark King archetype.
Yeah, well, we call them tyrants out here.
The opposite of the King Arthur archetype of the solar king who brings harmony. Because it's interesting because this process of cutting up Richard Whiting, cutting people up, and then the parts were put in different areas. This is what they used to do as someone was done for treason and as a warning. So they took the quarters and put them in different areas around. So one was in Wells, one Bath, one Ilchester, and one Bridgewater, which are all sort of surrounding areas from Glastonbury. But what I find fascinating about this is it's very Osirian. So in ancient Egyptian mythology, the mythology of Osiris is that Osiris is the golden king, and Set, his brother, is jealous of him and kills him and cuts him up into many pieces and scatters him throughout the land. And it's the job of Osiris's wife Isis, the great lady of magic, to find all those pieces and bring them back together again and bring him back to life long enough to conceive Horus. So I find it interesting that that archetype was playing out in English history as well. So the day it's believed that happened and Richard Whiting was killed was the 14th of November, 1539.
That's my birthday.
It's mine too, Gavin.
It sounds like we're cosmic twins.
Yeah. Not the 1539 bit though, right?
November 14th. That's
November
when this video
14th.
today. The video's coming out on November 14th. We're cutting it, this is great. It was your birthday and mine. And it's you saying it's the anniversary of Richard Whiting's.
That's right. And they're doing a big move by Glastonbury residents and mystics to sort of honor him. And they do a special ceremony for him on the 14th of November now. So that's really beautiful.
And why? I mean, he was the last what?
The last abbot. So the last abbot who was in charge of Glastonbury Abbey before it was closed down and broken down by Henry VIII and all its treasures were seized.
Wow. That would have been what year?
1539.
1539. Wow.
So I want to show you, just before we go to the next, you can go to the next one, yeah. So just south of Glastonbury, we see the River Brew. And this is one of the locations suggested in the Arthurian legends for the Lady of the Lake, because in the old days, there was an area where it formed a lake. And if you know the story, King Arthur, as a young man, is going with Merlin the wizard, and they go to the lake, and suddenly up out of the water rises this beautiful woman, and she presents Arthur with his sword Excalibur, his magical sword. So when Arthur was older and he was mortally wounded in a battle, his sword was thrown back into that lake. So I went to Pompalis Bridge. This is the site where it was thought that the sword was thrown back in. But as you can see, Gavin, all I could see coming up out of the water was a shopping trolley.
Yeah, like a swamp, not much.
No magical sword for me today.
No.
But this act itself comes from Celtic legend, because in Celtic times, they would make offerings of swords and they would throw them into waterways, whether that was rivers or lakes or bogs. And they would ask for blessings for their travel, for protection, or to give gratitude to the goddess or to the gods or one of the deities that lived in those waterways, because they believed that those waterways were gateways to the other world, which was the realms of the gods and the ancestors. And the Lady of the Lake is often associated with Morgan Le Fay, who is a powerful enchantress in the stories that's often considered to be King Arthur's half-sister. And there you can see me playing her, me playing Morgana. That was in a production of a modern-day mystery play written by the writer John Constable that I've worked with a lot at the Glastonbury Abbey a few years ago. So there's me presenting the sword. But in the legends, after Arthur is mortally wounded, it's the Lady of the Lake or Morgan Le Fay with possibly a number of other magical queens that meet him, and then they bring him back on a boat to the Isle of Avalon for healing or to finally die. And that's depicted on the Goddess Hall on the next slide. Oh, yes, that's it. So you can see here that the Lady of Avalon or Morgana, that King Arthur's there, he's been wounded, he's in his boat, and the Lady of Avalon has greeted him and she's leading him into Avalon with the Tor behind them. That's called the Goddess Hall, and there's a lot of ceremonies and performances, music that goes on there. But again, this is a legend, but perhaps it's actually coming from something real from ancient times. Because before Christianity, it was said that Glastonbury, the Isle of Avalon, was home to priestesses of the goddess, spiritual women devoted to the goddess who were the healers, the oracles, and the medicine women. Because ancient Celtic society was much less patriarchal than Roman society and then the Christian society that came in after it. In Celtic society, women could choose husbands and initiate divorce. They could become druids, poets, healers, and judges. They could even train as warriors and fight in battle alongside men.
It sounds more modern today, like what we have here and then now. But then
It's
you're saying,
interesting, isn't it?
yeah, but you're saying that the other way was more tyrannical. They didn't have freedom of choice.
In Roman era, that's when the rights, really started to change for women. So in as the culture became more patriarchal, the women started to lose their position in society. But there's a novel about that time called The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. It was made into a TV show in 2001 starring Angelica Houston. That's the next picture there.
Sad thing is that they're trying to bring that back out here now, where they're trying to remove women's rights now, and then it's coming. They're really trying to come back. So it's crazy.
Yes, it is, and it's interesting that in the ancient texts it said that Avalon was where the ladies who know all the magic of the world are. And the funny thing is that it's very mysterious that Avalon, this Isle of Apples, a fruit which carries in it the symbol of the divine feminine, was always associated with the priestesses, with the magical ladies. And it's perhaps not a surprise then that Glastonbury has been a place that has been one of the pioneering locations for the revival of the goddess movement. Since the 1970s onwards, it kind of flowered out of feminism, and through the groundbreaking work of authors like Kathy Jones, the fantastic mystic and oracle Sally Pullinger, the artist Monica Saju, and many other incredible groundbreaking women who have lived and worked in Glastonbury. In 2000, Glastonbury actually started the first Indigenous British goddess temple to be officially recognised as such that there's been in Europe for possibly 1500 years. So that's the next picture. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? That to have the first properly, officially recognised Indigenous goddess temple, for 1,500 years. And you can go there every day. It's open between 12 and 4. And a priestess called a Melissa can do you a blessing. You can meditate, light a candle. It's got an incredible energy, and they do a lot of events through the year at the Goddess Hall that I showed you the picture of before, for full moon ceremonies, Wheel of the Year dates, things like that. This temple is dedicated to the Lady of Avalon, who is said to be the goddess that's the guardian of Glastonbury. And those contours of the Tor in the landscape are like the body of the goddess. And on winter solstice, there's this amazing phenomena that occurs from Windmill Hill. So that's our next slide. Okay, it doesn't look like much, does it?
No.
Just looks like a little kind of, bit of tiny hill. It looks natural. It's just got a playground there. But I'd heard, if you're standing on it, then you look at the Tor at winter solstice sunrise and you will see the sun roll up the side of the Tor. And to be honest, I didn't believe it, Gavin. I thought, come on, you must be joking. And very often at winter solstice, it's too rainy and overcast to see anything at sunrise. But one year, me and my friend Jules were determined to see it. We went there and we stood on it, and you look at the Tor, and sure enough, this is what happened at sunrise.
Right here?
The sun rolled. So that's the Tor we're looking at. So that's standing from Windmill Hill. that little hill I just showed you, and the sun that's just standing
We're
there.
standing there.
Yep,
And
looking
then
at
you
this.
turn around
Yep,
and you
and
turn around and this is what you see.
it's the Tor. This is the Tor. So you're standing on here and you're looking at the Tor. You can see the Tor from here. But at winter solstice, you see the sun at sunrise roll perfectly up the Tor. Absolutely directly up it. So it can't be a coincidence. The ancients built that hill that is Windmill Hill, one of the sacred hills of Glastonbury, in order to watch this phenomena of the sun rising up the Tor. And it really is like the masculine solar principle making love to the body of the goddess.
Wow.
It's quite something. And you know, as the author and mystic Dion Fortune, who lived in Glastonbury and is buried in the graveyard here, she said, a religion without a goddess is halfway to atheism. Because, of course, we all come to Earth through the portal of the women's body as a result of the coming together of the masculine and feminine energies. And this sacred union was really honored in the ancient world. And we can witness the way they were honoring it in the land, in these incredible sacred sites like those in Glastonbury. And it's funny that this archetype of the priestess is so strong that even today in Glastonbury, you have so many female, I mean men as well, obviously, but female shamancas, medicine women, healers, oracles, wise women. There are more women than men living here, actually. And it's very watery. As I said, it rains a lot and floods a lot, which is that yin or feminine element. And it's interesting that when I studied Tantra with Marananda Sarita, she explained in India, she explained that the chakras in the body, going up through the body, are alternately active masculine, passive receptive feminine, active feminine, passive receptive masculine, going up the body like this. And the heart chakra, as she taught us, is active feminine, passive receptive masculine. So isn't it interesting that Glastonbury is said to be the heart chakra of the world? And it's got so much feminine energy. And even the divine feminine is encoded within the apple itself.
Yeah, it shows you that slide there with the sunrise coming up there. It shows you that the ancients were looking at the sun. I mean, they built this around looking at the sun. They wanted to watch the sunrise.
Absolutely. Like so many sacred sites all around the world.
Yeah, so they're showing you that there's some sort of power at looking at the sunrise and what it's doing for you. It empowered them. And I've experienced that myself, like looking at the sun in the morning and in the evening. You know, it definitely empowers you. And it helps vision, it helps with happiness, it helps with like just so many healing arts looking at the sun.
100%.
And we're coming up to a hard stop here soon, but did you want to give closing thoughts? And then I want to have you on for just a few more minutes as well. So, and what we can look forward to next time.
Okay, well, gosh, I've loads of stuff to tell you about the Holy Grail as well, but I'm not sure I'm going to have time. I might have to come back and do a Holy Grail special.
The Holy Grail is coming next. That's for sure. That's the one we got. We got it. You got to look forward to the Holy Grail, the secrets of the Holy Grail.
Brilliant. So yeah, for me, what's so important, because of course these are mysteries and we will never know for sure. But for me, what's important to this journey is awakening to the fact that life on Earth is a mystery. It's magical and it's sacred, because I feel sometimes in the modern world, we can feel like life is very robotic and mechanical, and that we should be robotic and mechanical. And when we explore these mysteries, like the mysteries of Avalon, or any of the other mysteries in the ancient world, it helps bring us back to this sense of wonder and magic that we truly are. That's why it's so important for me.
So that's why it seems like that's why you were drawn to it. I mean, you got the book, you met this guy recognized you. He looks like he was a troll. He recognized you at some library. And then he brought you down there, and then all of a sudden you became a part of the play. And that's how you really got brought into the mysteries.
Yeah, he was my mentor, Ken Campbell, and he was a truly great man, and he was a theatre maker, but also really kind of like a secret shaman himself, I would say.
Wow. So that brought you in and you became fascinated with it at that point, just completely, enthralled by it. After going to Oxford, starting in the Oxford days.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know. It's quite a change.
Yeah. From New York and you were in Broadway in New York. Is that where you were at that time
Well,
before that? Or
off
you were
off Broadway, Gavin.
off
Off
Broadway? Yeah.
Broadway.
Yeah. Okay, so let's stay on a few more minutes. I'm going to cut it there, Jacqueline. We'll do the Holy Grail next time. So stay tuned for the next one. We'll link it here at the end, and be sure to subscribe. And one more thing, I'm going to share, Jacqueline. I'll share your coming website as well, or your slide at the end here. I want to just make sure that we share that. Okay, that's this one here, right? Coming up
Right.
in the 6th and 7th of December.
That's right.
JacquelineHaigh.com.
Yeah, so I'm doing an initiation into the mysteries of Yule because on the wheel of the year is turning and we're coming up to Yule or winter solstice. And there's a lot of fantastic traditions and mysteries surrounding this time. A lot of where we get a lot of the Christmas traditions have their roots in the ancient traditions, the ancient mysteries. So I'm going to be doing an immersion into the Yule mysteries on the 6th and 7th December. So come onto my website and
Yeah,
get in
that,
touch.
and then in the sometime next year, you're going to do a trip to Egypt as well. For
That's right. So I run sacred tours to Glastonbury in the summer. And then next autumn, I will be doing a sacred tour to Egypt, to the pyramids and the temples.
That sounds fascinating. I would love to go to that. So, all right. So, thank you, Jacqueline. All right, everybody, hit the one, subscribe, check out Jacqueline's site, and I will see you at the top. And if you could just stay on another minute,